Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on in which time zone you are. Welcome to the second episode of What Matters Now TV. And next to me is my colleague, the Group CTO of Society, Michiel Borrell. He is hosting and I'm co-hosting. My name is Menno van Doorn. I'm heading the Research Institute of Society Labs, and we are researching digital technologies for, I would say, over 25 years. Trying to define what the impact of new technology is on society and on organizations. If you haven't seen the first episode, you can still go to our YouTube channel of Society Labs and watch Navi Raju talking about the conscious society, the first episode. And this time we'll have a different topic, but I would say something we definitely need to be more conscious about, which is the current state of disinformation, the deepfake world that we have entered, the conspiracy theories, maybe also the lies and the cheats and the confusion, all leading to a possible infocalypse. And we'll be discussing that, and hopefully and definitely also how to escape that situation. So we said from the start to each other, Michiel and I, we definitely want to be optimistic a little bit.
Naively optimistic.
Naively optimistic. So that's what we try to do. And so these are the topics, Michiel, but we also have a guest, and I think one of the advantages of this What Matters Now is that we actually can introduce you to the people that inspire us in the research work that we do. So Michiel, who is our guest for today?
Yeah, so today our guest is Nina Schick. She published a new book on deepfakes and the coming Infocalypse. And this is one of those books that when you start reading it, you cannot put it aside. You have to read until the end. And you're constantly your mind flips constantly between fascination about what modern technology can do and then being terrified about what new technology can do. Nina is an author and broadcaster, and she works on understanding and writing and talking about how technology and AI are reshaping society. She works right at the place where technology and geopolitics meet, and that's not always a pretty picture, as she will explain today. She worked on the front line of major global events like the Brexit, the EU migrant crisis, election interference, the evolution of disinformation, information warfare, and she has been an advisor to some of our global leaders like Joe Biden, the former vice president of the US, but also Anders Rasmussen, the former secretary general of the NATO. She's a regular contributor to publications and TV programs on Bloomberg, Sky, CNN, BBC. She writes in the New York Times, the Daily Beast, Time Magazine, and the New Statesman. She speaks 7 languages, and she holds degrees from both Cambridge and the University College of London. And we are extremely happy that she found the time to be with us today and to talk about this wonderful new book, Deepfakes. So Nina, very welcome to this episode of What Matters Now TV. Menno?
Hi, Nina.
Pleasure. Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Hi, Nina. Could we start by could you tell us a little bit more about your background? Because I believe you are half German, half Nepalese. Now you're living in London. So how do you end up in this arena of information warfare and write a book about deepfakes and Infocalypse?
Well, I've always been really fascinated in politics, and when I moved to London, I started working at a think tank which was dealing with the obscure policy area of UK-EU relations. And from there, I started to see, what was happening with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and how Russia was using modern technology to really step up information warfare. And that's really where it started. And then I started noticing how technology was basically colliding with all these political events. We know what happened in the US 2016 election, what happened with Brexit, until it got to the point where I was advising world leaders on how disinformation in future, we thought fake news and bad information was already bad, but in the future, it's going to be powered by AI. So we haven't seen anything yet, and that's where I started writing my book.
It's good that we still see you smiling, because I read the book also, and it's a fantastic read, but as Michiel said, it's terrifying at the same time.
Yeah. Now, so the title of your book, Nina, is Deepfakes. So maybe as a first question, you could explain a little bit of what deepfakes are. How do you define deepfakes?
So a deepfake is essentially a type of synthetic media. And what synthetic media is a video, an image, a piece of text, or an audio clip that is either wholly generated by AI or manipulated by AI. And the ability of AI to do this is really nascent. It's only been around for about 2.5 years. So we're looking at a future where all content is basically going to be made by artificial intelligence. It's going to be highly sophisticated, and it's going to democratize content creation, the kind of special effects we see in Hollywood for almost anyone with no skill and no money. But this, although it's going to have loads of exciting commercial applications, is also going to become a weapon of information warfare, the most sophisticated disinformation you can imagine. And that's what I call a deep fake. And I really want to distinguish between synthetic media and a deep fake, because not all synthetic media will be used for bad. But just like humans, there are going to be good and bad sides of this technology. It's going to be an amplifier. So just as though it'll be used for some good purposes, my God, will it be a weapon for bad actors as well.
So synthetic media, that's using the technology for good. Deep fake, that's using the technology for bad, right? That's how my understanding should be. Okay, Menno.
Yeah,
And so Menno, we made a compilation, I think, about some deepfake videos that we found on the internet, and maybe just to introduce the audience to the theme, maybe we should just show them some deepfake videos, and then maybe Nina, you can respond to that compilation that we built.
This is all wrong.
Which one did you like most?
Oh, I love Mr. Bean as, I think, Charlize Theron in a Dior ad. I mean, those are very early deep fakes, and that's one type of deep fake where somebody's face is swapped into a video in which they actually don't exist. And if you look at those deep fakes, you know, you can kind of tell that Mr. Bean is being put on Donald Trump's face. But I should note that those are very, very early examples of deep fakes. It's only been around for 2.5 years. And we're getting to the point where this is just a face swap, but an entire video can be generated by AI as well. And the quality is going to be so good that we as humans won't be able to tell that it's a fake. So even though those are really funny examples, essentially what we're looking at here is the ability for anyone to generate high fidelity film, even better than anything a Hollywood studio can make today. And what's more, they can do it for free and with no skill, to the point where a YouTuber can make, in about 3-4 years time, better quality fake film than anything you see coming from the most sophisticated Hollywood studio today.
Yeah, now, of course, at the beginning of the internet time, some 20-25 years ago, you had all these silly but quite innocent sites like Talk to My Cat and things like that. But I believe, and that's what you explain in your book, that this is much more serious, right? That the implications are much wider. But maybe we should take a test, Menno, about whether or not you can spot the deep fake. So Menno has prepared this test. So
Yeah, 10 questions, 10 points to score. We will show them one by one, and you just say this is a deep fake or not, and you get bonus points if you know the name of the person that's been shown. And we keep the score, okay? So let us see the first one. As you can...
fake or real?
Fake.
Yeah. You know how she's called?
No.
Her name is Dagny. She's from the company Digitalis, and that also created Pseudogram. That was the first model being created, digitally, of course. Okay, let's see another one.
Fake or real?
Oh. Fake. I know her.
Yeah. Her name?
Little Michaela.
Yeah.
She's a digital influencer.
How many
AI
how many followers does she have on Instagram?
2.7 million.
I counted. Okay, it's 2.8, but you know. A new one.
Fake or real?
Well, it looks real, but I suspect the answer may be that it's not real.
Yeah, this is one of this person doesn't exist actually. Yes. And the other one.
Fake or real?
Real.
Yeah. No, this is also this person doesn't exist. This one.
Fake or real?
Real.
Yeah, that's correct. You know who it is?
No.
It's Daniel Kalt. He's the CTO of UBS Bank, who created a digital version of himself. So he actually has a copy of himself. This one.
Fake or real?
Fake.
You know who she is?
No.
Scarlett Johansson, a robot version. And she has been outspoken against fakes, specifically of herself, of course, as you can imagine.
Fake or real?
Oh, I know the answer. I mean, you would think it's real, but I think this is a fake.
I'm actually in doubt now because I know there's a fake one.
Who is it? What's his name?
It's Dali, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So you get
Yeah,
an
we
extra
counted
point
correct.
for that?
Yeah.
So fake or real? What is it, Benno?
Now I'm in doubt because I first thought it was the real one, but now I know there's a fake one. I don't know.
I think it's real.
Okay. Let's say it's real. We'll check. Next one.
Was it real or was it fake? No, it was real. Yeah, okay. So you're good. Now I'm trying to count
Oh
the
yeah,
score.
I know. It's
yeah,
a
yeah.
serious game. I know.
Yeah. Fake or real, Nina?
Real.
Yeah, and his name is?
That's Nicolas Cage.
Exactly. And he's a meme. So you see his deep fakes in Indiana Jones. He is an actor in all these kind of movies that he didn't play. Yeah. And this one?
Fake or real?
I know that one is actually a still from an actual deepfake film.
Yes. It's where it all started. It's Gal Gadot, and that's where all the deepfakes originated, I would say. And the last one?
Fake or real?
Again, I know that one. Although if I didn't, I might think it was real. I know that that's a deep fake of Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, I love this one. It's hilarious. There he warns you for Facebook actually, but it's very, very well done. And maybe this is one of the examples that you talked about. That the quality is getting better and better and better every day. So how many points, Michiel?
Well, Nina had 7 points of spotting whether it was fake or not, and then 3 extra points because she knew the name. So it's 10 points in total. So what's the prize that she has won? You didn't think about the prize,
I will
right?
send you a
Oh,
deep fake of myself. I'm making deep fakes all the time, the funny ones. I will send you a deep fake.
Yeah. Now, so now that we are starting to understand what deep fakes are, Nina, can you explain a little bit about how these deep fakes are created and can anybody create deepfakes? Can I do it myself? Tell us a little bit about that.
So the idea that you could use AI to create fake media has actually been around for a while, but it's only become a practical reality, like I said, in about the last 3 years. And this is thanks to the perfect storm in terms of the deep learning breakthroughs of the last decade, and also the ability of computers to churn through data a lot quicker. So essentially, to train AI to make a deepfake, all you need to do is get lots and lots of training data, which if you're trying to make a deepfake of a person is photos of them, images of them, and then get your AI machine learning system to learn what that person looks like so that it can generate it as a form of synthetic media. And the really interesting thing about AI generated media is that before AI was able to do this, people tried to do the same with special effects, CGI, but they never quite got humans quite right. They looked odd, they didn't look quite human, they looked roboty. But AI can be trained to make humans look exactly what they look like, and they can actually be trained to hijack your biometrics. So if I take a clip of your voice, I can use that for my AI to learn what you sound like. So the really huge implication of this technology is that anybody can be made to say and do things that they never said, that they never did. And again, in terms of who can make it, how accessible is this, it is their barriers to entry are higher than people think, but it is quickly becoming more accessible to the extent where now this kind of technology is even available in apps, or you can go online, there's free software, loads of tutorials. If you are somebody who wants to make this, you can make this fairly easily for low cost.
Yeah, and so you can follow courses on the internet or even get starter kits of how to do this.
Absolutely.
So I will take a look tonight and see if I can make a nice fake video about my good friend and colleague Menno.
Well, maybe you want to try the new Adobe Photoshop, Michiel, because yesterday they announced that they have, in their new version, there's a neural filter where you can just upload your picture and toggle with your age or the brightness of your eyes. You can deepfake yourself, and it's all included in a package in the official Adobe software. So maybe, would you like to try that kind of?
Absolutely, absolutely. I would like to lose not only some years but also some kilos, if that's also a filter.
Yeah, but we are laughing about it, but it's really fascinating how professionalized the industry is getting, I would say.
Well, I mean, but that's also, so it's very nice to see this as a gimmick and as a toy and playing around, but like you do in the second chapter or second part of your book, it has grave consequences, and so maybe we should...
For instance, a fake voice of a CEO calling the CFO to wire transfer money to some fake account happened several times. So if you combine those things, Forrester says there's already a $250 million risk market out there. So
$250 million.
Dollars,
right?
sorry, yes, dollars. So what is your prediction for this year? Do you think the economic and business impact? So what's your stake at that? And how many deepfakes will be spotted by, if we look at the state of deepfakes in 2020? What would be your guess?
So there already is a very malicious, well-articulated first use case of deepfakes, and that's in non-consensual pornography. But pretty soon, this is going to leach out into all different parts of life. It's going to be used as a tool of identity fraud, and it's going to be a risk not only to individuals, because it means that any anonymous actor can take the sanctity of your image, your voice, and make you say and do things that you never did. So it's not only this unique threat to you as a private citizen, but is obviously going to be a big business risk as well. And you already pointed out that we have started seeing these kind of use cases emerging now, where CEOs are being tricked into wiring money because they think they're speaking to their colleagues when in fact they're speaking to AI-assisted fraudsters. I think that we are only at the very beginning because, like I said at the top, this technology is still nascent. There's still some barriers to entry, But as it becomes more accessible and as it becomes easier and cheaper to use, as well as becoming more sophisticated in terms of its quality, we're going to see it everywhere. All kinds of industries, from insurance to politics to communications, are going to be impacted by the malicious use of synthetic media. So first use case, malicious use case, is in non-consensual pornography, but we're starting to see this year being the year how that's emerging in other use cases as well.
Now, we won't go into the discussion about politics and the US election, because probably we could spend 60 hours talking about that. So we have consciously decided not to address that. Now, on the positive side, we have been experimenting a little bit ourselves, and so Menno and his team has created an artificial host. And her name is Anna, and she lives in the cloud. It's technology created by Synthesia. And so have you ever been interviewed by a artificial deepfake character before, Nina?
Not yet, but if you're about to do it now, then I can tell you that this is going to be, you guys are cutting edge, because this is increasingly going to be the way that interviews are run in the future. So you're setting the trend here.
Yeah, well, I hope it's not going to become a trend, because part of our job actually relies on actually doing it live. But anyhow, let me introduce Anna to you. So Anna is our artificial host, and she already has a question for you. So here's Anna.
Hi, Nina. So glad to finally meet. As you know, I am a virtual host, but I can also be a teacher, as fitness instructor, a singer, or a doctor. What do you think about the business opportunities of deepfakes?
So Nina, what do you think about the business opportunities of deepfakes?
So this is obviously amazing. Anna, I know, is generated by Synthesia. I know the founders of Synthesia. They are working on generating synthetic media, and they're looking at applications across all kinds of industries. And like I said at the top, synthetic media is going to have so many business opportunities, not only for films, not only for video games, but also for corporate communications. This host, Anna, who is generated by Synthesia, by AI, the Synthesia platform is as simple as you log in on the back end, you type out the text as though you were typing an email, and then you can choose what kind of host you want to have to ask these questions, as well as how many different languages you want to communicate in. So you can understand that if you're, for example, the CEO of a multinational company who wants to communicate to audiences in different markets, the fact that you can just do that now with a few clicks with AI is going to be revolutionary. It's also going to mean things like you're able to license out your digital likeness. So if you're Michael Jordan and you want to appear in the latest ad for Adidas or Nike, you can simply license out your image so that they can generate you in various advertisements using AI. So it's going to completely reshape the future of human communication and content production.
Yeah, it's fine. I find it fascinating, because I just met her as well. And if you look at her very carefully, you see this little dimple, I think, on her head. So they have created that, and I'm sure there are some settings that you can make it bigger or smaller or whatever, really to really make it look like a real person. Menno.
And also the example that you gave Nina about sending your picture and taking it into a commercial. Now in COVID times, it has become quite relevant, because you can't take the plane that easily. So the famous people are doing that right now. We have got a nice example that we would like to show of David Beckham, and you probably have seen the commercial that he made as a plea to do something against malaria, where he talks in 7 different languages. It's also coming from the same company, Synthesia. I suggest that we just watch the video first.
Malaria isn't just any disease. It's the deadliest disease there's ever been.
Se dice que ha matado más de la mitad de la población que ha existido.
وما زالت تقتل طفلا كل دقيقتين.
Mais nous pouvons y mettre fin. Nous savons comment, nous en avons la possibilité.
हमें और अधिक कार्रवाई की जरूरत है.
我们需要让世界领导人关注。 Hivyo tunazindua kampeni ya sauti.
Ohwele bawari upin malaria.
Speak up and say, malaria must die. One voice can be powerful, but all of our voices together, then they will have to listen. Malaria must die, so millions can live.
So Nina, I've read somewhere that you also speak 7 languages. Now you can see that's not so special anymore, is it?
Not special anymore at all.
No. We have some questions coming from the people who are watching YouTube, and there are sort of the same question. Jan Esseling, for instance, he is asking, would we need AI to protect us against deepfakes, or do we need to become smarter as humans ourselves?
I think the answer to that is we need to do a bit of both. With synthetic media and deepfakes, they are, like I said, going to completely change the future of content production. So it is inevitable that they're going to become ubiquitous and that their quality is going to be so good that no matter how smart we are, we're not going to be able to tell the difference between a piece of synthetic and authentic media. The CEO of Synthesia, the company that's working on generating those pieces of content we just looked at, thinks that in 7 years' time, up to 90% of video content online is synthetic. So we're not going to be able to, from the human eye, tell what's fake and what's not. So we're going to have to learn to build AI software to detect what media is synthetic, because we simply won't be able to keep a hold on that.
Yeah, that was another question from Manon Sens. He's asking how future-proof is using AI for detection of these fakes?
That's a really good question. And I have to say that ultimately the jury is still out on it, because these fakes and synthetic media is actually generated by a machine learning system that's called a general adversarial network. So it's trained on adversarial learning. That means that every time the detection capability gets better, in theory, the generating capability can get better as well. So the jury's out on if we ever reach a point where the generator is so good that the detector can never generate a piece of synthetic media that's synthetic. So is there a point where even AI can't tell what's in the DNA of that media to be able to tell you that that's a piece of fake content?
So that's for sure. That will be something that will be with us for a couple of years going into the future, this arms race between creating synthetic media and detecting it. What I would like to do, Nina, is shift now gears. So now that you've explained what deepfake is and make the distinction between deepfake and synthetic media, in your book you then, in the second part, you start to talk about this Infocalypse, right? The title of your book is Deepfake and the Coming Infocalypse. What do you mean with that term Infocalypse, and how do you define Infocalypse?
I define the Infocalypse as an information ecosystem that is increasingly corroding and dangerous and untrustworthy. And I link it to the exponential technological revolutions of the 21st century, because I think they are changing the architecture of the information ecosystem in ways where they are allowed to spread bad information in an unmitigated way, so that the age of information has quickly become the age of disinformation. And I want to point out that I know that bad information, whether it's misinformation or disinformation, has been around since time immemorial. But what this technology is doing is amplifying human intention to the point where right now there is more bad information than ever before, and it's more potent, and it reaches more people than it ever has done in the history of humanity. So that is really the Infocalypse, the corroding information ecosystem.
And can our systems, like our democracy and things like that, can they resist this Infocalypse, or would that be a collapse of those systems as well?
Well, in my book, I argue that the Infocalypse can be seen as an existential threat to liberal democracy in particular. And one of the reasons is because in order for our democracies and our societies to survive, we need to be able to engage in a good faith debate, and we need to have some kind of objective understanding of what's reality or truth. But the corroding information ecosystem makes that increasingly difficult. And I think that This happens in many ways through the spread of disinformation. So actors who are trying to undermine our democracy, they can do this in more potent ways than ever before, but also misinformation, because what is happening is that good people are being caught up with bad ideas. And you see this across the political spectrum. So yeah, it's a real threat to liberal democracies. However, maybe a boon to authoritarian regimes who want to use this corroding information ecosystem to undermine the pursuits of truth and justice.
So that's the optimistic part, that it's a golden age for dictators and authoritarian leaders.
Well, there's a fantastic quote in your book, Nina, in the second chapter called The Master. And it's a quote from Yuri Bezmenov. He's from the Russian KGB. Now, we have found a television interview where he talks about this and actually says what you've put in the book. And I suggest that we first listen to what he calls how to change the perception of reality, and then go back to you and ask you for some comments on it.
But in reality, the main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country.
Wow. So Bezmenov it's a KGB defector, right? And the video is from 1984, so that's why you see the quality of the video is not perfect. So I wrote it down, what he actually said in 1984. It's a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interest of defending themselves, their families, their communities and their country. Now, already in 1984, but it's very relevant today. So are we facing a new Cold War, or are we already in the middle of this Cold War? Is it a war on reality? And who is fighting against whom, Nina?
Well, I included the quote from Bezmenov, and I start my book by looking at Soviet disinformation, because they were, during the Cold War, they were very good at using information as a weapon of warfare. And increasingly, I believe that the entire information ecosystem is starting to resemble, through mis and disinformation, that which Bezmenov describes in his quote. It's dangerous, it's untrustworthy, and the age of information, which we thought would be this unmitigated good for humanity, the abundance of information, which we thought would make us all wiser and lead to more human progress, is actually revealing that it has some pretty dark sides. And the thing that Bezmenov describes, where the abundance of information means that we can't come to make conclusions in the interest of ourselves. This is already happening. You see it, for example, I know we're not going to dwell on politics, but consider the question of Russian interference in US politics and how partisan that question has become. So I think it's not so much a new Cold War, it's just that the entire ecosystem itself has corroded, and we just are too far behind and we don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, and of course we are talking about the Russians, but of course there are many more actors. What about the Chinese? Are we doing, as the Western world, are we doing the same in response? Do we? So this warfare is escalating, right?
Yes, and I think the very nature of warfare in the 21st century is increasingly going to be this information warfare. It's going to be less about tanks across borders and, green men with standing in fatigues. It's going to be about controlling narratives in this information ecosystem. Russia is the master at this kind of game. They were very, very good at it during the Cold War. But as you correctly mentioned, there are all kinds of players now, and not only state actors, lone influencers. You know, one person can have the same impact that in the 80s you would need to be a well-resourced national state. So not only is there going to be more information warfare, the actors have changed as well.
Now, and so when I was reading this part of the book, this was where I got terrified and cold chills went down my spine. Because also, it's not only how sophisticated this influencing is, but it's also the time horizon, right? This is a slow influencing kind of warfare where it takes 10 to 15 years to fully evolve. So it's quite worrisome.
Well, we can also go to the here and now, Michiel, to the pandemic. And Nina's using a word, the Infocalypse, but the World Health Organization is using the word the infodemic. And what they are saying actually is that the infodemic is as dangerous as the pandemic. So the spread of all this fake news about the pandemic. Now, my question would be: so, would you agree that it is equally dangerous? And two, how does a virus of a mind spread? So, how does it work? That this infodemic? How does it? What's the mechanic of it?
I do agree that the infodemic is just as dangerous as the virus itself. And in fact, in my book, I look at COVID as the perfect case study for the Infocalypse, the corroding information ecosystem, because you really see all the things that I'm talking about playing out in all their dimensions. I know I start the book talking about deepfakes, but deepfakes are only the latest emerging threat in our crisis of information. And when it comes to COVID, you can see how it's become a battleground for state actors who are actively spreading disinformation so as to undermine the public health efforts of its enemies. But it's not only state actors. We have our own homegrown domestic agents who are spreading disinformation around COVID. You even have scammers and fraudsters and people who are trying to sell quick quack cures online, business people who are profiting off this corruption, this corroded information ecosystem around COVID to make money. So you really see it playing out in all its dimensions. And as to why do people fall for this? What are the human psychology elements? I think that humans have always been fallible for this kind of thing. Disinformation, misinformation, conspiracy, it's been around for as long as human society has been around. Yeah. What's different now is that these type of ideas can spread immediately. They can spread without any barriers, and they're the tools by which you can spread them, whether that's the platforms or even now increasingly making fake AI generated content to support an idea, is accessible and more powerful than ever. So bad ideas have always captured humans, but now the power of those bad ideas to be spread is simply unparalleled to anything we've seen in history.
So the World Health Organization has coined this term, right, infodemic, and actually they organized a conference on June 29th of this year about this infodemic situation. And when you read the conclusion of that conference, it really sounded to me like this quote from this famous TV show, Fawlty Towers, from John Cleese, where you have this character, Manuel, and he's from Barcelona, and he constantly says, I know nothing, right? And so basically the conclusion of that report is we know nothing. And at the same time, you see all these conspiracy theories, right? Flat Earth Society, Pizzagate, the vaccination, 5G, QAnon. Some are harmless, some are less so. So why is it that people think, and that people think that according to research, 1 out of 10 actually believes these fictions?
First of all, I think that the biggest factor, like I said, is the ability for these kind of conspiracies and bad ideas to spread in a way that has not been possible before. The second is a big corrosion in trust in public authorities and public life. So the fact that, you know, when the World Health Organization was giving out its guidance on COVID, you know, the fact that it was coming from the World Health Organization made people not want to listen to their advice. And that's been mirrored around the world with advice coming from governments and public health authorities. People don't trust what used to be the kind of respected bastions of society. And to me, this is really an indicator really of the decline or the corrosion of liberal democratic institutions and society. And then there's also these, thirdly, human psychological elements. If something as big as COVID happens, psychiatrists and psychologists say that people want to put a narrative around these events. They want to feel as though there is somebody behind it, whether it's Bill Gates or George Soros, because that makes an uncertain world where something as random as a global pandemic, you know, why did this happen? It gives it a feeling of more certainty. You can understand, oh, well, yeah, it's an elite cabal of people, including George Soros and Bill Gates, who want to vaccinate you so they can implant a chip into your mind. So there's all these different reasons as to why this is happening. And I think that the technology in our information ecosystem is enhancing those kind of human elements as well.
We have another question from Anna, but I would like to suggest to skip her question because there's also real people here asking questions, and I still think that's more relevant and more important. One of the questions is coming from Suzanne, and she is saying, would the Infocalypse lead towards a new society of less individuality and more community-like environments? Now, I'm a little bit puzzled by the question because it's not completely clear to me. I can understand that it could lead to a new kind of society, but she sees a
sectarian society, or
well, individuality versus community. Can you?
I think if I haven't quite understood the question, but if the point she's getting at is, you know, is society moving away from individualism to more kind of group and identity type of politics? And I think the answer to that is yes. And I think that in part this is made possible because the Infocalypse and related ideas around objectivity and truth are being undermined. And you see how this is playing out across the political spectrum. And one manifestation of this is increasingly the rising strength of identity politics in the West, which don't always have anything to do with objectivity or fact or reason.
Yeah, and there are many more questions coming now. A totally different question coming from John Meulemans. We know John because he's got a marketing agency in influencers. And he was a very practical question. How can we test persons and media on fakeness? Is this even possible?
So if John is asking about whether influencers in future will be AI generated, I think that's inevitable. And
that's his business.
Yeah, so it's actually going to be a fantastic business opportunity for you to pursue, John. But in terms of testing whether they're fake or not, again, you're only going to be able to detect these synthetic media creations as fake as long as you have detection software. And increasingly that's going to become difficult because synthetic media is going to be ubiquitous. Although I imagine as a marketing agency, if you were to create synthetic influencers, you would have an ethical obligation to disclose that your influencers are indeed synthetic.
Yeah. We can go on with questions here, but I think looking at the time, I also want to look at some solutions, probably.
I'm desperate to hear some solutions because I'm getting quite worried already, and so maybe so of course it's clear that the lines between fake and real are blurring. I think that well, I'm doing your part now, Menno. I realize, but. And so synthetic media is even bringing back dead people, right? So bringing them back from the dead. And maybe we have an example of Salvador Dali. So maybe we should look at that video, Menno.
It's an art AI project, but I think it's very well done. And let's first see how it looks like fake, and then come back to you to talk about the blur of dead and alive.
I have a long-standing relationship with death. Almost 30 years. I in life always believed the desire to survive and the fear of death were artistic sentiments. I understand that better now. But there is one thing that makes me different. I do not believe in my death. Do you?
Now, this is not the question whether you do believe in death, yes or no. But I mean, this is arty, but how relevant is it? This is also about identity and your digital identity. So where do you see this going?
To me, this is really an indicator of just how powerful synthetic media is and why the taxonomy around it needs to be decided carefully, because not all applications are going to be malicious. When I talk about deepfakes and synthetic media being used as disinformation, it's very important. However, there will be amazing use cases of synthetic media. What we just saw was a resurrection of Salvador Dali from the dead for the Dali Museum in Florida using AI. And just the ability of AI, like I said, to be trained on your biometrics, to be able to resurrect people from the dead is astounding. And there will be many artistic as well as commercial viable applications. But this power, and I should really underline here, this is going to be accessible to everyone, anyone, and so it will be misused, and we have to be ready for that.
No, but of course, for any technology, it can be used for the good and for the bad. You cannot uninvent the technology. It will be there anyhow. It will develop anyhow. And so I agree with you. We have to start looking at how can we kind of regulate that the good things can still happen, but the bad things happen less. Maybe we should go to another final question from Anna, just because we like what we did with her and how we created this thing. So here's another question from Anna for you, Nina.
To what extent can synthetic media be used within communications? Is it ethical for people, businesses, and governments to pretend to be someone else? Are there certain limits we can't cross?
That relates already to some of the questions that also came up from the audience, right? How ethical is it to create a digital persona, a virtual persona, and then not clearly tell the audience or the person that is interacting with this robot that it's actually a bot?
That is actually coming to the core of the issue here, because synthetic media is going to completely overhaul the way that humans communicate with each other, the way that we perceive the world, and actually the way that we even perceive ourselves. Because one other manifestation of synthetic media is going to be increasingly that people will have digital AI avatars of themselves. So all of these questions, what are the ethical boundaries? What do governments or creative agencies have to disclose? What are the legal frameworks? This is vast. This is something that society needs to talk about now, because the technology is coming. And as we know from a lot of the kind of the creator side for this technology, it's really exciting. I mean, it's something that a lot of money and investment is being poured into. And we can't let this technology simply run away without putting some kind of ethical framework around it and beginning to understand what it means for society. But I wish I could say there's a simple answer there. My answer is we need to talk about it now, because it's going to have such far-reaching implications.
Yeah. So one question that comes up to my mind, and that's actually already debated in many places, is what's the role of big tech companies? Should we trust those big tech companies that facilitate the platforms that create that make this all possible? Should they regulate themselves, or should they warn us when we are watching a YouTube video with a synthetic person in it? Should they warn? Should there be a disclaimer about deepfake videos that you can find online? What's the role of big tech?
I think because the corrosion of reality is what we're looking at here, because the future, in my view, is synthetic. And people won't be able to discern whether or not what they're interacting with is organic content. I think that what is imperative is to have at every touch point with the internet, every point that we go into the ecosystem, some kind of mitigating software, for example, detection software, but also provenance software. So if you're a journalist, you can upload your media to show that it's authentic and it hasn't been tampered. This is not synthetic. These are the kind of big technical solutions I think that the tech companies, but also we as a society need to actually think about building into the architecture of our information ecosystem, because if we don't, then we face a future where everything can be fake and anything can be denied.
We have a couple of minutes to spend on the solutions, let's call it real solutions. But I must first say that your book is not about the solutions in the first place. It's more about the alarm bells. That was your intention. But we have put on a slide here with a couple of words that could drive some ideas that we can discuss, whether we should go after the big tech companies, as Michiel suggested, or what governments can do. There was a question from the audience that's talking about education. What should we do at schools? So is there any one of the solutions more important than another? Is there one? I mean, there's no silver bullet, is there? But what would your first pick be? Would it be provenance? Is that the thing that you just mentioned, or something else?
You're right. There is no one silver bullet. So I think the first thing, and this is really why I wrote the book, is the conceptual framework. So just understanding what's going on. You know, how is Russian disinformation related to AI generated digital avatars, related to fake news in Myanmar? Well, it's the corroding information ecosystem. And once you put that conceptual framework in place, then you can start thinking about solutions more clearly. Broadly, the solutions fall into two categories. You have the technical solutions, so things like using AI to build detection software for things like deepfakes, but also the technical ability to embed into the hardware of all your devices provenance. So if you're, like I said, if you're a journalist, if you are a human rights activist, you can prove before any kind of court or of public opinion that your media is authentic, it hasn't been tampered with. The second category of solutions that are not technical are the human solutions. And that's where it gets really, really complicated. You need to think about education. You need to think about policy. You need to think about regulation. You need to think about cross-border international cooperation. All of this basically amounts to the fact that what we're looking at here is a paradigm change in the way that information flows across the world. And until we get ourselves as a society into the mindset that this is so radical a transformation, then we're not going to be able to come up with the big ideas to understand how to catch up with this or even deal with it.
So Nina, so when both Menno and I had read your book, we started to have some, of course, we had many debates about this. And one of the points that Menno brought up is, aren't we overreacting to the problem? Aren't we making the problem bigger than it really is? And I found that an interesting point of view, although I didn't agree with him. But I mean, I remember the early days of the internet where people said, I'm never going to put my credit card online because there are hackers everywhere and it will be stolen. So aren't we overreacting, and that we should trust society, that yes, we have these technological possibilities, and yes, we will see some problems and some conflicts and some, but it will fade and we will get to understand it, and then everybody will be live happily ever after.
So I would, in response to that, I would say that there is a I fundamentally see human nature differently, because I think this is the same kind of utopian vision which the founders of the internet and the technology of the information age had, right? You're going to build this awesome technology which is going to be an amplifier of human intention, and the world will become a better place. But what we've seen is that doesn't only mean good things will happen. The worst parts of humanity are going to be amplified as well. And that's going to be exactly the same with synthetic media. Like I said, the future, in my view, is synthetic. Yes, there are going to be many amazing things that come out of the power of synthetic media. But my God, are there going to be a lot of misuses and a lot of ways in which this is weaponized against people. So I think it would be naive to think, this is a mistake that we've made for the past 30 years already, that this technology will not amplify bad human behavior and the worst parts of human intent. And I would just say, look at what's happened in the age of information over the past 10 years and how quickly that's gone sour, to kind of get a more realistic view on how synthetic media will also be used for bad in the future.
Do you allow us to stay optimistic as long as we take away the naivety?
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing is I'm not pessimistic. I don't feel like the world is going to end. I just think that we are entering an immense period of change and disruption and flux, and society as we know it is being transformed by these exponential technological changes. And we just need to get a bit of a grip on how we are going to deal with it. We can't live in the age of AI and synthetic media and all of the kind of developments we've talked about when our society is still operating for the analog age. So I just think we need to future fit society in a more effective way.
Well, Michiel, part of my, I wouldn't even call it optimism, but getting out of my depression comes from another book written by Hugo Mercier. It's called Not Born Yesterday. He's a cognitive scientist, where he explains that we, from an evolutionary standpoint, are not gullible. We don't believe everything for a good reason, because we want to survive. And I was just suggesting a little antidote. If you're really depressed, there is some optimism to be found in that book, that we are vigilant and we are not only victims, but we are in a certain way. But the real question is, are we vigilant enough? But read the book, I would say.
So as kind of a therapy for people that are now totally depressed and paranoid and think the world will come to an end and we won't have democracy anymore, they should read this other book.
I don't think that the solution is reading books, by the way.
But no, maybe not. Maybe not.
Maybe watch Netflix. Forget about it. I don't know. We have one last question, maybe from the audience. What should be? Jack Esselink is asking: at what level should these ethical boundaries be defined? At a country level, EU, or global?
I mean, ideally, they should be defined at a global level, right? Because you are talking about the flow of information across borders. So if you're thinking about how a deepfake can be weaponized against somebody, what are you going to do if the person that's done it is sitting in a different jurisdiction, in a different state, in a different country? Unfortunately, with my background in politics and geopolitics, I don't see that happening. No. So one hopes that regional giants like the US or perhaps even the EU can take a stand on leading the kind of ethical considerations that need to be put into place here.
But it triggers a thought in my head, is that just like we have now treaties on nuclear weapons and we have treaties on biological weapons, should we have a treaty on deep fake weapons?
Yes, I mean, this is essentially going to be, yes, deepfake weapons or information warfare, the proliferation of bad information. That is the way in which war is going to be fought in the 21st century. So it might sound ridiculous, but that is exactly what we should do. We should have treaties on how this kind of technology and bad information or misinformation can be spread or shouldn't be spread.
A treaty on weapons of mass deception, I would coin that term.
Maybe a nice topic for the next episode, Michiel, because we have come to an end.
Or maybe a next book, Nina.
Your sequel. Nina, thank you so much for being our guest.
My pleasure.
In the second episode. So Michiel, we are looking at the third one in December. We already made a long list of possible victims to be at this show. But if you
possible victims, possible authors, right?
Sorry. Yeah. Well, yeah. Our victims, the authors, of course. And maybe if even people have ideas about interesting authors or books, they can just message us. So again, Nina, thank you for being here. Thank you for your great book and the inspiration. And thanks everyone watching What Matters Now, the second episode.
Till next time.
Till next time.